السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين هم بالزكاة فاعلون. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما نقص مال عبد من صدقة. صدق الله مولانا العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Respected friends and elders, last couple of weeks we've been discussing about some of the successful believers. So we discussed the ayat of Surah Al-Mu'minun. Allah Ta'ala, He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. He says that definitely the believers are successful, and then he goes on to describe who the successful believers are. He goes on to describe the success. He goes on to describe the successful believers. And the successful believers have a few characteristics. And you and I, whenever we hear these things, we should try to embody these characteristics. Whenever we hear that these are the characteristics of a successful believer or a good believer and so on, we should think to ourselves, how can I be like that? How can I be a successful believer? How can I be an amazing believer? How can I embody these characteristics? You know, just as, for example, when we hear about someone making a lot of money, and we think, oh, how can I make that kind of money? Right? How can I also be successful in terms of dunya? Right? So similarly, when we hear in terms of deen and akhirah, we hear that this person, the person who does these simple things, they will find success. And this is true success. Right? The success of this world is what? It's temporary. It's a few years. It's a few years in comparison to the everlasting life of the akhirah. Right? You compare it, it's nothing. Right? It's not even a drop in the ocean. Right? We cannot even fathom eternity. This is the reality. And so we find Allah Ta'ala describing the successful believers. He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, the believers are truly successful. And then he goes on to describe the characteristics of the successful believers. And the first defining characteristic of a successful believer is he prays and he is punctual in his prayers. That's the first, and that's the most important. And this is not difficult things, or these are not difficult concepts for us to understand. Right? These are very simple, basic things that every single Muslim should do. This is not something extraordinary that he's praying salah, mashallah. No, that's the basics, right? This is the bare minimum that we're supposed to do. Right? And we should always, every Muslim must pray their salah. Then we discuss this in detail. You can listen to that online. Then we spoke about, last week we spoke about a successful believer is that believer who ignores and avoids useless things. Those things that don't benefit him, whether in speech or in action. And we discussed that last week. So today we will speak about the third characteristic of a successful believer, which is وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ. The successful believers are the ones who give their zakat. They are habitual in giving their zakat. Allah ibn Kathir rahmatullah alayhi, under the commentary of this ayah, he mentions, right, and he says that zakat, or under this ayah, there are two types. And I'll mention a couple of different variations or different types. The first is that Allah Ta'ala, He mentions zakat here, and generally the common definition of zakat is what? Zakat of wealth, the 2.5% that every person must give on an annual basis. That's what's generally referred to as zakat. When we generally refer to zakat, we mean zakat al-mal, zakat al-amwal, the zakat of wealth. Right? And so this, Allama ibn Kathir, he mentions, he speaks about this. He says that zakat, this ayah was revealed in Makkah, but the obligation of zakat happened in the second Hijri, which was in Medina. So how can it be? And so he explains that it's possible that there was a form of zakat or just a general obligation towards giving zakat, and then later on it was codified and the exact amounts were given in Medina. Right? Just for example, Salah. Right? Salah was also there before Medina, but it became codified and it became structured after Medina. So similarly, zakat. Right? So that's one definition, one explanation of zakat. A second explanation of zakat that's given in this ayah, scholars they say that it can refer to zakatul nafs. Zakatul nafs, meaning the purification of an individual, the purification of that person's soul. Right? These are the two definitions or two explanations that can be given for this ayah. And so in that case, obviously it would make sense even in Makkah, whereas people were perfecting themselves and trying to better themselves, right? And then of course there's a possibility that both meanings are intended, right? That zakatul mal and zakatul nafs, that a person should perfect their zakat of the wealth, and also a person should correct and fix their own nafs, right? Both meanings can be intended. And so we, obviously today our focus will be on zakatul mal, zakatul nafs. It should be meaning the purification of an individual. That'll happen over an extensive period where a person, they continue to abide by the commands of Allah Ta'ala, they follow the practices of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they follow these ahkam, they follow these characteristics of the successful believer, and so on and so forth. Right? This is the way of purifying a person's own self. And this takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of discipline and so on. So today we'll focus on zakatul mal, the zakat of wealth. The zakat of wealth, zakat itself, right? Zakat itself is, of course, as we know, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Rasulullah says that Islam was founded on 5 principles or 5 pillars. And we know these 5 basic pillars, which are kalima, saying la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, then salah, then giving zakat, fasting in the month of Ramadan, and performing hajj if at least once in a person's lifetime. And so this zakat, although it's an obligation, unfortunately we find many people not fulfilling this obligation. We find many people ignoring this obligation totally, or being very relaxed in this obligation. Unfortunately, this is the reality. And this is the problem with us as an ummah, as a collective ummah. We face this issue. And the reality is that the Prophet ﷺ, he predicted this. He predicted this obsession with wealth. He predicted this. He says, إِنَّ لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ فِتْنَةٍ وَفِتْنَةُ أُمَّتِي الْمَالِ. He says that every single ummah, every single nation, they had different trials and tribulations. As we know, the different prophets, they dealt with different problems. But the fitna of this ummah, fitna to ummati al-mal, the fitna of this ummah is wealth. And so therefore, Rasulullah, he foresaw all of these problems. Our obsession with wealth, he foresaw this. He prophesied this. And so now it's up to us to try and remove that obsession from us, and to move away from that obsession, and try to leave our attraction and leave our obsession of the dunya. So Rasulullah, he spoke about the obligation of giving zakat. And zakat linguistically, just to go into a bit of background, zakat linguistically can refer to 2 meanings, right? Zakat linguistically can mean 2 things. Either one is that it means tahara, which is purification. Right? Tahara means purification, which we generally know as well. Right? So zakat can mean purification. So how will it purify? The idea is that you give zakat, which is 2.5% of your savings, right? 2.5% of your savings, and that amount of zakat that you give, it purifies the remainder of your wealth. The zakat purifies the remainder of your wealth and puts barakah and blessings in that amount. That's one. And that leads to the second part. The second definition is nama. Nama means for something to grow. And so when someone gives zakat, that amount, the remainder of their amount, the remainder money that they have, that amount grows. So although a person he sees or she sees that their amount, their bank account is decreasing, right, by a certain amount of money, but the reality is that Allah Ta'ala will replenish that, Allah Ta'ala will give more to that individual. This is, of course, this is our understanding, this is our belief from the Quran and Sunnah. We believe that Allah Ta'ala will replace, we believe that Allah Ta'ala will give more. Not too long ago, I believe it was a couple months ago, not even a couple months, I spoke about different rewards of giving charity. I mentioned 15 different rewards of giving charity. I don't know if anyone remembers it. It was not maybe 2 months ago, maybe, right? But it was, I spoke about 15 different benefits of giving charity. Right? And so all of those things can apply. Generally, obviously, we can apply them to sadaqah, which is optional charity, but many of them we can apply to zakat as well. Many of those benefits can be applied to zakat as well. So there are many, many, many benefits of giving charity, right? Especially obligatory charity, we get many of these benefits as well. But today we'll focus specifically on zakat. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I'll mention the hadith. It says 3 things. ثلاثة أقسم عليهم وأحدثكم حديثا فاحفظوه. It says 3 things I'm telling you. 3 things I'm telling you, and the Prophet is saying, I swear on these 3 things. Right? He's swearing on these 3 things. أقسم عليهم. Does the Prophet need to swear? No, the Prophet doesn't need to swear. Why does a person generally swear? To emphasize their statements, to solidify what they're saying. Right? Wallahi, billahi, Allahi, I'm speaking the truth and so on. But the Prophet he always spoke this. He always spoke the truth. And so he never needed to take an oath. But even then he took an oath. He said 3 things I swear upon. And so memorize these 3 things. And he says the first is مَا نَقَصَ مَالُ عَبْدٍ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ. He says that when a person gives charity, that money does not decrease. That money does not decrease. This is the Prophet ﷺ declaring this. Had he not swore, we would have believed him. But he swore on this as well. That a person who gives charity, that money does not decrease. And so bearing that in mind, we should ensure that we are fulfilling our obligations. We must fulfill our obligations. We must fulfill our responsibilities. As I mentioned the other day as well, right? Salah is an obligation. We must fulfill it for ourselves and for our children. For ourselves and our children. We must make sure that our children are also praying their salawat. Our families are also praying their salawat. We must ensure that our families are also giving their zakat. We must ensure that our families are also giving their zakat. Allah Ta'ala speaks about this in the Quran. He asked why. Why would you not give? وَمَا لَكُمْ Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. It says, why would you not spend in the path of Allah Ta'ala? وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Why would you not spend in the path of Allah Ta'ala? Whereas وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Whereas to Allah Ta'ala belongs the entire earth, skies and earth. To Allah Ta'ala is the inheritance of everything. Meaning Allah Ta'ala will inherit it. What does that mean? Meaning that once you all pass away, the only one alive will be Allah Ta'ala. The only one who will be living will be Allah Ta'ala. So He will inherit everything anyways. All of your dollars, your gold, your silver, your houses, your cars, everything you will leave, and Allah Ta'ala will remain. So He says, why would you not? Why would you not give it in charity? Why would you not give zakat on this amount of money? The scholars, they explain under the commentary of this ayah that if you do give it, if you do get it, if you do give this money, then you get the reward of charity. But if you don't give it, then you don't get any rewards of charity. In both cases, you lose your money. Right? In both cases, your money is gone from you eventually. Either one way or the other. Either you give your money in charity and Allah Ta'ala preserves it for you, or you don't give your money in charity and Allah Ta'ala takes it from you anyways. That can be in any number of ways. It can either be in the form of Allah Ta'ala testing us in different ways, whether it's our health, whether it's our jobs going away, or whatever it may be. Allah Ta'ala can test us in different ways. Or the eventuality is that a person will pass away, so Allah Ta'ala will take the wealth then, definitely. Right? And so therefore, the scholars, they say that why would you not spend? Right? If you don't spend, you will lose out on the reward of giving charity. And if you don't spend it, Allah Ta'ala will take it anyways. Right? So فَتَصِلُ إِلَيْهِ أَمْوَالُكُمْ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَجْرٍ إِنْفَاقٍ. So the wealth, your wealth will go back to Allah Ta'ala without the reward of spending it. Without the reward of spending it, بِخِلَافِ مَا لَوْ أَنْفَقْتُمْ فَتُؤْجَرُونَ. As opposed to had you spent it, have you given it in charity, then you would have received the reward of that. You would have received the reward for that amount that you gave. Right? So it's important that we remember that whatever we have, every single thing that we have, it's given by Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Ta'ala will take it back. Whether it's our life, whether it's our health, whether it's our wealth, whether it's our children, every single thing that we have belongs to Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala gave it to us, and Allah Ta'ala will take it back. This is the undeniable reality. In a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he speaks about the horrors of the people who don't give zakat. He said that the one who Allah Ta'ala gave wealth to, Allah Ta'ala gave him money. And generally, I don't go into fiqh, I don't go into fiqh masail, generally in Jummah lectures, but I'll just mention something, right? So generally, the amount of zakat is about $5,000. More or less, it's about $5,000. That's the nisab of zakat. And if you have more than $5,000 in excess wealth, right, wealth outside your debts, so you deduct your debts and liabilities, and then you have $5,000, then you have to give zakat. Right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the one who Allah Ta'ala gives him wealth and he doesn't give zakat, his wealth will be turned into, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives an example. He says that on the day of judgment, his wealth will be turned into a bald-headed poisonous snake, a very poisonous snake. And this snake, the description of this snake will be that it will have 2 black spots over its eye. Meaning they will not see you. As snakes, they don't really see you, or they don't have anything, right? They will not see you. These snakes will not care how much pain you're in. And so then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the snake will surround that person, encircle that person. And that snake will surround him and squeeze his neck, and the snake will bite his cheeks. And then the snake will say that I am your wealth. After this horrific and gruesome example, the Prophet ﷺ says that the snake will say, I am your wealth, I am your treasures, and you didn't give. Right? I am your wealth, I am your treasure, that you did not give. Right? So this is the reality, that if we don't give our wealth, then that wealth will come back. But it will come in a very disgusting form, and it will be a means of our punishment. All the money that we work so hard for, that money will be used against us. And we don't want that, of course. And it's very easy, it's very simple to give zakat. I'll mention. But Rasulullah continues and he says, then recite the ayah of Allah Ta'ala. He says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ يَبْخَلُونَ بِمَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ وَخَيْرًا لَهُمْ بَلْ هُوَ شَرٌّ لَهُمْ. He says that don't think, those people who are miserly with their wealth, they should never think that this is good for them. Right? The people who are miserly with what Allah Ta'ala has given them, they should never think that this is good for them. That, oh, I'm gathering so much money. I have so much money. They should never think that this is good for them. But instead, this is evil for them. Such a descriptive or graphic image Allah Ta'ala He makes for us. He says that on the day of judgment, this wealth, it will be turned into, it will wrap their neck like yokes. It will wrap their neck and it'll be squished, or it'll be squeezing these people, right? The people who were miserly with their wealth. And then Allah Ta'ala repeats again, that to Allah Ta'ala belongs the inheritance of the skies and the earth anyways. Allah bima ta'maluna khabir, and Allah Ta'ala is knowledgeable, He knows everything that you do. So this is the reality. This is the reality of zakat. If we give it, it benefits us. If we don't give it, we are the ones who lose. We are the ones in loss. We are the ones who are missing out. It's important that we do give our zakat. And most of us, we know that we should give our zakat. And zakat is such a small amount. It's such a small amount in comparison to the other obligations that we have. Zakat is like 2.5% of your savings, right? Not your annual income, not the amount of money that you earn, but rather the money that remains at the end of the year, right? The amount of money that remains at the end of the year. Imagine we were taxed like that. That'd be nice, right? That'd be so nice if we were taxed that someone said, okay, you know what, whatever money you spend in the year, you don't have to give tax on it. Whatever money you don't spend, that's the money will tax you on. That'd be amazing, yes? But the reality is that we don't get taxed on that. At the same time, our taxes are not 2.5%, yes? Nobody is taxed at 2.5%. Maybe some people whose names are not going to be mentioned here, maybe their taxes are 2.5% or less. Right? But for us, the average person, we pay 20, 30, maybe even more percent in taxes. You can pay up to a fourth or a third of your money goes into taxes. Not always is it spent in the correct avenues as well. That's the unfortunate reality. Many times our money is being used for other causes that we are not happy with, right? As law-abiding taxpayers, we're not happy with our money going to certain places, but we can't do anything about it, right? You're forced to do it. But the amazing thing about zakat is what? Does 2.5% go to the masjid? No, it does not. 2.5% cannot go to the masjid. Rather, what I mean is that 2.5% cannot be used for any function or any building of masajid, any building of homes, any building of wells, any building of bathrooms, whatever. Many people have this misconception. I'm not sure where this came from, but they say that you can use zakat for building bathrooms. It's even worse. Right? And so, yes, you're supposed to spend that amount, that 2.5% of your wealth, you spend it, and you must give it physically to the poor. Tamleeq is a requirement. Tamleeq is a requirement that you must physically hand over, whether it's in cash, whether it's in gold, silver, food, clothes, whatever it may be. It can be anything, but it must be physically handed to the recipient. Imagine if 2 billion Muslims, imagine if all those people who have to give zakat gave their zakat. Imagine how much of the world's poverty we would solve if we actually gave our zakat, right, properly, in the proper avenues. Right? But the unfortunate reality is that due to lack of knowledge, due to ignorance, or just not caring, unfortunately, often our zakat is not being dispensed properly. Unfortunately, our zakat, sometimes ends up in the wrong avenues, and we're not spending it properly. We're not utilizing, or we're not making sure that our zakat is spent properly. Right? Something for us all to understand is that when you give zakat to a masjid, for example, we also have a zakat box in the back, right? When you give zakat to a masjid, or when you give zakat to any charity organization, what happens? Is your obligation of zakat complete? No. Many of us, we think that if I drop zakat here in this donation box in the back, then my obligation of zakat is complete. It is not complete. The masjid representatives are only your representatives, right? The mutawallis, the caretakers of the masjid, they are only your representatives, right? So when they take that money, they distribute it to others. So once they distribute it, that's when your zakat is complete. Up until that point, your zakat is not complete. Understand? So this is the reality, that we have to ensure that our zakat is being given out properly. We have to make sure that whenever we give zakat, wherever we give zakat to, that our zakat is being spent in the correct manner. And it's our responsibility. It's not the masjid's responsibility. If you donate here and the masjid misuse it, inshallah, they will not misuse it. I know the manager, mashallah, and they spend it well, mashallah. But let's say they do, let's say you give it to some organization and they misuse it and they mishandle it. And they, instead of donating a full 100%, they donate 90%. Right? There are many organizations, by the way, who take multiple percentages, right? Whether 10, 15, to some reports, according to some reports, some charities take up to 40% of your charity. Whatever you give, 40% of it is not going to the poor, up to 40%, right? According to some very, very famous charities that you may be shocked to learn about. But nonetheless, like you and I, we must make sure that our charities are going to the correct recipients. Some of these charities, I'll tell you one problem, right? That many of these charities they do. Right? One thing that they do is they take zakat for themselves. And they take the ayat of Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. Allah Ta'ala says that the zakat, obligatory zakat, is for the fuqara, masakin, for the poor, and then عَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, those people who work for zakat. وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, right? And so many of these charities, what they do is they take money claiming that they're عَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, that they're working for giving out zakat. But the reality is, many scholars, and I can quote you many books on this, right? I can quote you many books, and if you want to learn more, go check in the hashiyah, in the commentary or the footnotes of Al-Lubab fi Sharh al-Kitab. Go look at that book. If you can read it, then you can come speak to me after that. Right? But you go there, you'll find that zakat is not, you cannot give zakat or not just anyone can take zakat. These organizations, the amilin alayha, are referring to the government. Those who the Islamic government stipulates. Is there any charity? Is the masjid, are they being appointed by the government to collect zakat? No. Only the Islamic government, they're being appointed to collect zakat. And so in that case, the Islamic government, they can allow others to take zakat. They can allow the collectors of zakat, they can allow them to take the zakat. Outside of that, there are many scholars who agree on this, or unanimous on this fact, that zakat collectors cannot take zakat because we didn't appoint them to take our zakat. They're doing it, and so we're giving it to them. So it's very important, right? They cannot take zakat. And we must make sure that they are not taking their zakat. Alhamdulillah, there are many organizations who are not taking zakat, who have 100% donation policy. Right? And so what they do is they use their sadaqah amount for the running of their operations. And that's okay. You can use sadaqah amount for running operations. But you cannot use zakat amount to run operations. That's very important for us to understand. Right? Along with that, it's important. And many of these organizations, what they say is that, you know what, we take it because we need the funds to run the organization. And that's a fair statement, right? That they do have many overhead costs. But that can be easily averted. How? Right? Simply after zakat, just write this amount, this percentage, for example, 10%. Let's say they charge 10%, they should write that we charge 10% as overhead fees. So you give $100 for zakat, 110, you must give $10 extra as overhead costs to cover the overhead costs. And that's understandable that they are fulfilling obligation, they are distributing the zakat properly, right? Maybe we don't have access to the poor people, so then we give it to these organizations. And so that's the easiest solution for it, that they charge a separate amount, and we should happily give them that because they are fulfilling a responsibility. And so just as we give tips and we do all of these other things, right? We should support these other organizations as well, but outside of zakat money. That's very important for us to remember. Right? So this is just one problem I want to highlight, and I try to highlight this all the time because this is an unfortunate reality that many people are not aware of. Right? And now I'll tell you the best way or the best solution for giving zakat is what? Giving it by yourself. Give zakat yourself. Forget about organizations, forget about anyone else. You should give zakat yourself by your own hand. When you go to your countries, many of us are immigrants from other countries. When often we do visit, right? When you do visit, most of the people there, someone who's driving a rickshaw, you think he has 5,000 US dollars in his savings? There's no way, right? If you have 5,000 US dollars, you think he'd be riding the rickshaw? No, he would not be, right? And so therefore, most of these people are absolutely eligible for zakat. You don't even need to do background checks. Easily, you know that they need zakat. Whereas here in America, for you to give zakat, and again, there are some narrations and there are people, and fiqh says that we should generally give to the people around us. We should generally support and then support the local community as well. And that is true, right? But $100 in America and $100 in Bangladesh are two different, right? They're entirely different. Right? $100 here may last the person 1 week, maybe, if they extend it, right? Or 2 weeks, let's say, if they push it, max a month, right? But $100 in those types of countries, they will go much farther for months, and they'll feed multiple people, right? And so therefore, yes, we should try to support the people local to us, but at the same time, we should make sure that our zakat is being utilized in the correct manner, and that we are giving it. So when we physically give the money, when you go yourself and you give the money, there's an entirely different level of appreciation that you will have. Right? One is that you just give it to, you just write a check out, or you just swipe your credit card. That's one thing. Another is you going physically and you seeing the people, you seeing the situation of the people, and then you give the money. That's an entirely different story. And so therefore, it's a responsibility for us that we go and we distribute the zakat with our own hands. Again, you can give zakat over different times. So you don't have to give zakat at one time. You can give it over the entire year, for example, right? What I recommend, you can give zakat early as well, by the way. So what I recommend always is, for example, if your zakat date, which is an Islamic date, it has to be an Islamic date, by the way. Let's say your zakat date is Ramadan the 1st, right? From Ramadan the 1st until next year Ramadan, right? Start giving your zakat. Start slowly giving your zakat. Maybe it's difficult for you to give your entire zakat amount, but you estimate maybe my zakat amount will be, $1,000, for example, right? And you take that $1,000 and you go and you distribute $100 a month, for example. You give $100 a month and you make sure that it's reaching the proper recipients, and you do it every single month. And so by the time next Ramadan comes, you've already fulfilled your obligation of zakat. You understand? So every single one of us, we should do this. We should ensure that our zakat is being distributed properly. We must make sure that it is distributed properly. It's our obligation. And again, it's our obligation. I'm only reminding you of this. This is your obligation. You must do it. It's your responsibility. I'm just simply reminding you. I'll conclude on this one hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that there are three people or three things. Whoever does these three things, right? Whoever does these three things, they will taste the sweetness of Iman. whoever does these three things, they will taste the sweetness of Iman. The first is that he worships Allah Ta'ala alone, which inshallah we should be doing. The second is that a person declares that Allah Ta'ala is one, that there's none worthy of worship besides Allah Ta'ala, and hopefully we should be doing that as well. And the third is that the one who gives zakat with a happy and a cheerful face. We shouldn't think, oh man, so much money. Like, in reality, is there a lot of money? No. For every $1,000 that you have, it's $25. $10,000, it's $250. Right? For $100,000, it's only $2,500. You have $100,000 in savings, not $100,000 that you make in the year. $100,000 in savings, you only give $2,500 in zakat. And that's an amazing bargain. It's an amazing bargain. And if you want to find out more rules, and you should find out all of the rules related to zakat so that you make sure that you are giving your zakat properly and it's going to the proper recipients. This is our obligation, and we must ensure that our obligations are being fulfilled correctly. Allah Ta'ala give me, Allah Ta'ala give us all tawfiq and understand and practice.